Hey guys, we are live with Revel&Awe. I am Arielle Sadan, coach and co-founder of Revel&Awe. We are a coaching and consulting company that helps people build self-trust and resilience, find moments of joy, awe, and inspiration, choose and pursue a direction in their lives, and really live into their potential, all while learning and creating opportunities to make purposeful and powerful decisions. We are live today with Josh Upton, who is now joining us to talk about translating for change and all about what that means. Let's see him join.
How's it going?
Welcome to our live.
Thank you. Thank you. It's actually my first live ever.
We're honored to have you.
I appreciate it. I'm honored to be here.
For those of us who are, for those of you, I guess, who are joining for the first time, our lives have gone through a wide array of shifts and change throughout COVID. We started in March daily, then shifted to bi-weekly, and now we are really excited to start a new mode where we host people who are just doing really interesting, cool things in their lives and with their work that, you know, we can share with our audience. One thing that I want to point out before I ask you a barrage of questions, Josh, is that we actually know each other along with Jake from our coach training at IPEC, the Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching.
That's right. That's right.
Shout out to IPEC.
Not even a paid sponsor.
Hashtag not an ad. Josh, I don't know, maybe you can start by telling us a little bit about yourself.
Sure, yeah. So first and foremost, I'm a New Yorker. I'm a musician. I'm a swimmer. And I'm hopefully a good friend. Now, professionally, I guess, that's what you're asking, is I'm a development partner, which is kind of a combination of a coach, producer, and facilitator. I work mainly with digital creative independents, founders, leaders of different industries. And I do that all because of my background, which is a combination of digital production, organizational strategy, change management, consulting, all focused on people and people change. So basically, that's kind of how I got to this. And a big element for these things is that I'm driven by a few core principles, number one of which is embracing humanity. And that's a through line that carries throughout everything that I do. What that means to me is basically really trying to ground our work, how we treat people, and in our humanity. How do you become your best version of you, but also how do you enable others to do the same? And so just to bring that to what we're talking about today. Obviously, this topic is deeply about humanity and shared humanity that we have with our fellow people in this country. And it's a movement that I care about deeply. It's a responsibility that I feel that I think we all should have in fighting systemic racism, social injustice. It's something that I've been educating myself and incorporating into my work for the past 6 years-ish. Certainly not done. Certainly something I've gotten support from a lot of friends along the way on. And that's kind of it. I mean, the only other thing I wanted to acknowledge for a second is that we're quite literally in the midst of another police shooting, almost murder of an unarmed black man in front of his family. And clearly unacceptable, but beyond unacceptable, it just speaks to the continued work that needs to happen. George Floyd was months ago, still happening. So I'm just happy to be here today to talk and be any part of this discussion.
You know, I think that what you do and what you've especially been doing in this space is so important for obvious reasons, and for some people who might not get the direct connection between systemic racism, social injustice, and what translating for change is, and why, you know, you're here talking about that today. Can you connect the dots?
Yeah. Oh, sure. Yeah, good question. So yeah, I mean, I think very high level what translating for change is, which is just like working title for what's in my brain, is this idea that we're all uniquely suited to be the perfect translators for the people around us, for our spheres of influence, and basically tapping into that reality in service of making change. And fundamentally, this is something that can be applied to change of all kinds, but certainly something that's relevant, important, and necessary, I think, for right now. And just to build on that a little bit more and be clear, this is not the only answer. This is not instead of doing all these other things that people are doing. That is deeply important. Protesting, donating, posting, whatever you're doing, this is not like why you're doing that. This is something that can hopefully help other people have some more clarity around how they can show up in this movement. It also certainly does not take the place of listening to and following the lead of Black leaders who are doing tons of work and carrying tons of the load in this space. But it really comes down to this idea that in order to translate, you need to have some foundation of education and knowledge to allow for the nuance that's required for translation. And then you need to apply it. So you can't just translate to yourself, you're translating for others. So trying to understand basically the spheres that you're in, the places that you have influence, and how you can use this kind of mindset of being a translator to instill change. So when I say nuance, I can even this conversation we're having right now, I don't know everyone that's listening to this. I don't know everyone who's going to hear it. And I might not be the ideal messenger because I don't necessarily have shared language with some of the people listening. I don't have shared experiences I can pull from. I don't have shared trust of like lifelong relationships, for example, that maybe someone else might be able to do and might be able to have more of an impact in changing minds and bringing people in. So I think that's kind of a lot of what Translated for Change is. I can get into a little bit more, but the other thing that sticks out to me is that it's kind of the lowest hanging fruit ever. Because if you're a person who comes into contact with other humans, then you can be applying this. And hopefully that's everyone. So
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. I mean, the thing that it makes me think of is the idea of code switching, like when you speak multiple languages, the ability to switch in and out of, English and French, or for me, English and Hebrew. It happens in so many ways seamlessly that you don't necessarily even notice. And the more fluent you are in that particular language or the multiple languages, the easier that switch is. And it sounds like there's a lot of overlap with what you're talking about as you have more fluency in the comfort and the trust in the types of language that would appeal to a particular person or group that you're trying to engage with. That makes it easier for you to switch into that mindset and that mode in order to have more constructive conversations.
100%. And it's funny you bring up code switching because that's like a very relevant topic to this movement. I mean, that's something that gets brought up a lot, the need for people to have to code switch. Many times people of color needing to code switch to feel like they can fit in, which, everyone feels some feelings like that, but it's certainly something that's a big topic around social justice. And I think the only thing, just to make it like more like practical a little bit, just to start, is like, it also implies that, this knowledge is something that you have to continue to build on. It's not like you do it once and you're done, right? So just because I've started working on this more intentionally, 5 or 6 years ago, doesn't mean that I am like woke champion of the year and I can just like hang my hat up and have a great time. Like, that's not it. I've worked in change management around people process at companies, like performance reviews, for example. And, I've already done that, but I just recently took a course on becoming an accomplice, which is like basically a more active version of being an ally. And in it was a discussion around performance reviews and bias, and the way that it was framed in a way that I had never quite thought of before. And that I was able to literally bring immediately randomly that day, because I had a session with the client, into a conversation we were having about performance reviews. Like, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Like, taking a thing that you learn, understanding your audience, and then applying it in service of change. So,
I mean, on the one hand, that sounds like such a high mountain to climb because it's never ending. And simultaneously, I think it describes both, anybody's search for excellence in their respective areas.
Yep.
And that consistent mountain that we know exists as we're trying to actually enact change on every level with everything that's going on in the US right now.
For sure.
And so I think that that part that you're talking about, specifically in applying and iterating and consistently improving yourself, is so important to just like keep in mind without prematurely getting overwhelmed and exhausted, because that's what it's like in every area, but I don't know that it's put so fine a point on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point. I mean, I would have gotten there later, but this is an endurance challenge. This is not a one and done deal, like, honestly, this came out of some of the like barrage of things happening on the internet, which let's remember, it's all about immediacy, right? Yeah. It's all about, what are you doing right now? I mean, we hear, what are you doing right now? What are you doing every day? What are you doing? Well, for the sake of, humanity, back to that point I was mentioning, what was the last time that you identified a thing that you were going to do, that you wanted to do, and then you just immediately started doing it for the rest of your life, right? I mean, I can't think of a lot of things that I've done, right? And so partially this is also a matter of giving people grace to figure out how they can be part of this. And that's not to say don't apply pressure. That's not to say people should not be actively figuring out what that looks like. But I'm not sure that forcing and pressure is always the route. And that's honestly a lot of times where translation comes in. So
yeah. I'm gonna cut in and maybe zoom out a little bit, because I know that you touched on it, but I really want to make sure that we talk about it. What actually inspired this concept, this sort of structure that you've created around translating for change?
Yeah. So it's a variety of things. It's a combination of like my experience and who I am, and then things I've done and all that. So I'll just break that down. Basically, like I mentioned earlier, I started like really more seriously taking my role in this movement more seriously about 6 years ago. I was lucky enough to have really good close friends who were willing to hold space for me, give me the grace to like practice, learn, try being a part of this, try speaking in new ways, try incorporating these things into my work explicitly and subversively, frankly. And when everything happened around George Floyd, I was, like a lot of us, kind of overwhelmed by the barrage of what was happening on the internet, but also overwhelmed by the emotions and how intense everything felt. And I was trying to dig into what can I do based on what I'm good at, right? Which is another theme that I'll come back to. But basically, in my work, a lot of my work is holding space for people to navigate challenging times and things they're trying to develop and grow. And so I decided that I would start opening up my calendar to do free sessions around Black Lives Matter, and specifically holding space, a safe space specifically, for people to engage around these topics, to ask questions, to ask stupid questions, to ask me or ask themselves, like, how can I be involved? And sort of through those conversations, this idea of translation kept coming up. And then as it kept coming up, I started actually just actively referring to it in my sessions with people to see how it resonated, and it kept resonating. And so I think like a lot of it came down to that. I think the other thing is, frankly, I think a lot about my role in general in life as a translator. When I was working in change management with large corporations, I was working with very senior people at large corporations, which frankly is systemic change. It might not be the systemic change we're talking about, but it actually partially is, right? And so I found in those environments, my role was to translate complex ideas and new ways of working and new ways of treating people into language that, bigwigs and frankly a lot of old white guys and white people could digest. And I'm not negating, I'm a white guy, so I get it. But I think that like basically what inspired that idea is this combination of doing the work, having this time and having these sessions with people and them resonating, and then frankly applying it and seeing how it plays. And honestly, you and I and us talking about it has actually only made me clarify some of the key elements further. So I appreciate that.
Uh, well, I'm also happy to hold space for you.
Thank you.
I think the parallel between change management, like on a corporate level, is actually really relevant because it's just sort of scales of magnitude. And I think when we talk about, fighting systemic issues, whether it's racism or, I think that's like the biggest issue that we're facing right now in, especially in the US,
Yep.
also globally. Um, it's so macro and it's so challenging to change that system so quickly. And I think, when you talk about immediacy, that's something that we want that instant gratification and that knowing that, okay, tomorrow we'll wake up and things will be different.
Mm.
But unfortunately, as we know from even corporate change management, that's not going to happen.
Oh yeah.
And if we sort of take things down to a much more micro level, there's more ability to radiate that change. So if you can change the opinions or the activities or the way that people go about doing something, on a small team or just one person at a time, that can radiate up into more macro effects. And it sounds like as like a person who can translate, that's really where that can come into play.
100%. I mean, I really resonate with that. Basically, after working in change management, I was working like Pepsi, right? I mean, this is a 200,000 person organization. Frankly, it felt like hubris that we were saying we were going to change this organization. I'm just going to be frank, right? And like, my belief is that if you're doing that work, when we were doing that work, if you were not feeling like there was progress by making an impact on one person's life, then you're missing the point. And I feel like, and I'll get to that in a second when I start breaking it down a little bit more, but we need to be able to establish momentum. Change requires people feeling like change is happening. And if you only look at the big picture, frankly, it's difficult to see the change. I'm not minimizing the fact that we need to do the work to make this big systemic change and people need to push. But if we're trying to get people involved, we need to have people feel like they're actually making an impact as soon as possible and feed off of that feeling of making an impact. And you can do that on an interpersonal level. And it's not anything less or not as important.
So that's actually a great segue. So how can like a single person, an individual, start implementing some of the ideas that you've structured around translating for change into their life so they can start seeing impact, like they feel like they're making a difference?
Sure, yeah. So I think I broke this down into 6 things because, breaking things down into principles or whatever is a better way to do things. Easier to remember. I guess I'm probably going to write about it now that I did it so people can remember it. But basically it comes down to nuance through knowledge, defining your spheres, knowing your audience, practicing adapting, acknowledging that it's a long game, and finding others. And I'll break down all of those.
Okay.
So, and I'll try to do it quickly because I know we don't have that much time. So, and I know I can be blabby. But like I mentioned earlier, the reason for this whole idea of translation is around the nuance, right? You can go to Google Translate and put in some words and it can spit something out, but it won't necessarily give you the nuance that a native speaker will give you, and probably won't, right? So in order to do that, you need knowledge. And it's really important. There's a reason why this is the first one, and that's because you can't skip this step. Like, you need to be feeling why you're doing this. And frankly, once you get enough, it shouldn't be an obligation thing that people are feeling. And if you're doing it from obligation, you're doing it, then fine, whatever, as long as you're doing it, great. But my belief is that for change to actually happen, it's got to happen because people want to do it. And so the more information you get from sources that you're interested in. One of the things that I wanted to also point out on knowledge is, sure, you can read things about the history of social justice and from the greatest writers and activists. I don't put that down at all. But I think one important thing also is to think outside of that. Think about what you're interested in and start reading about and learning from people who are not like you in those spheres. A lot of this comes down to knowledge that we're all humans and that we all have similar things going on, and therefore advocating for others in service of that. So I think first thing is nuance through knowledge. So read the books, articles. I don't need to give you the lists because they're literally everywhere, right? So, and don't feel overwhelmed. Just pick anything. Literally just pick anything. If there's no wrong answer, just pick anything. Keep it diverse. Your goal is to understand and to feel. Not just understand, to feel this. When these things happen on the big scale, if you're not feeling it, something's missing. So that's that. I think the next thing is defining your spheres, right? Everyone has different spheres. This is something that resonated with a lot of people. People are like, oh, I don't have a lot of power in my job. It's like, okay, well, talk to me about your life, right? Oh, you're a mom. Oh, you're a founder. Oh, you're a manager. Oh, you're a mentor. Oh, you're this, that, and the other thing. You're doing all these things in your community. Those are all spheres of influence. And there's some where you have more influence than others. And ideally, you try to think about which ones those are so that you can start orienting your translation in that area, right? I mean, the sad truth is that I can pretty much guarantee that all of your spheres need some work in this realm. 100%. Whether you're a parent, not a parent, friend, coworker, whatever, there's almost definitely work to be done, right? So there's this definition stage. So you have the knowledge, now you're defining your spheres. The next thing is knowing your audience, right? So translation takes empathy. It requires thinking about the other person, not just about your point, right? You can't just yell your point at someone and hope they get it, you know?
Yeah, unfortunately.
Hey, like, you know, if people can just hear Black Lives Matter and they believed it, that would be great. But clearly that's not the case. So you got to really take these spheres into account and take your audience into account. Think about the last time you aligned on something. Think about how they've responded to feedback in the past. Think about how you've talked about challenging topics before in a productive way, and then try to apply that lens. And that gets to the next thing, which is just do it. Practice and adapt. You talked about this iterating earlier. Like, you just have to push yourself to do it. Have the conversation. Try to communicate, even if it's not an intense conversation. Take a stab at talking to a friend, very low-hanging fruit, about an article you read around these topics. See how it feels. See how it resonates with you. See if you're able to kind of own that message, or if there's something that you're not comfortable with. And then adapt. Take it back, take that feeling back and adapt it, all right? And I think the final two are around acknowledging the long game, right? And we touched on this earlier. This is an endurance challenge. I understand, and I don't fault people for saying, what are you doing every day for social justice? I don't fault people for saying that. But speaking from my personal experience, I don't do anything every day other than wake up and go to sleep. Thank God, right? Like, there might be some other things. I mean, I don't even brush my teeth every day. Like, don't tell anyone, you know, sometimes I do, I forget, you know? And I'm not saying that to minimize. I'm just saying it to, like, give some grace to ourselves and others, that whatever you need to do to stay in the game mentally, physically, right? Try to do that. It relates to everything, but it certainly relates to this movement. And remember that progress over perfection, just trying. Like, don't get it perfect, just try. Acknowledge the long game. And finally, it's finding others. And this is something that is something I pulled definitely from change management work. It plays a lot of different roles, right? First of all, doing things by yourself is just more challenging than doing it with other people. You get some feeling the support, also maximizing your impact, keeping up momentum is big time. But one of the other things that I've reflected a lot on, one of the principles of change management that I've worked with a lot is this idea of celebrating wins. And in this context right now, that's actually fundamentally challenging because we're in a deeply performative moment right now on the internet where people are posting things and it's performative advocacy, right? Sometimes it's difficult to know what it is, but certainly saying, hey, I just want to share that I had a really big conversation with my grandma about this thing. Please give me some likes. That's kind of gross, you know, like, and maybe we should talk about it more, but I can understand why some people might feel like, I don't want to like show off about my advocacy right now. But we need to celebrate wins. We're human beings. We need to have some recognition, even in ourselves, that we're on the right path. And so when I say find others, that could be finding other people like you who are trying to do this work so that you can share wins together in a non-gross, safe space. because you need to keep going. The only way to keep going is to have momentum, right? It's the mental health, physical health, support networks, things of that nature. So again, it's nuance through knowledge. It's defining the spheres. It's then digging into your audience and how they respond and how you interact with them. It's doing it, practicing and adapting. It's acknowledging the long game, and it's finding others to do it with you. So that's the gist.
You know, one of the things that I think is so important, like all of those things together sound really big. And what I love about what you said is the iteration, just like trying things out, seeing what works. Also, something that, you know, I know from myself and my conversations around challenging conversations in general is also knowing what your triggers are and like how that applies to the different spheres. Like if you're talking to your friends, you're probably going to be ticked off by different things than if you're talking to your parents or to your grandma about, you know, challenging topics. Yep. And being able to also identify, like, when you're thinking about those spheres, how do you also protect yourself from like falling victim to your own triggers so that you can really stay in the game and in the conversation and make your point without just, you know, sounding emotional or whatever the reaction might be when you get triggered.
I love that.
So I think that, you know, trying things out, testing the waters, and also like knowing yourself well enough to like prepare like emotionally as well, I think is so important to those conversations. And I love that you're doing this. Okay,
quick thing, real quick thing, if we have a second. Because just building on what you just said, I think the note that you just said about it and that you thought about it is another topic that comes up a lot for me. Like there's a lot of pressure that people feel, particularly allies, white allies, pressure of like saying the right thing, right? And that's understandable. This is a very touchy topic that is in the middle of the like most intense time where we're talking about it. I get it. But one way to try to deal with that is to be considered, right? Is like minimum bar. Have I considered what I have said before saying it? Have I considered what I've shared before sharing it? And the reason why I say that is because you might still get pushback. People might still call you out. But as long as you have considered it and have rationale for why you did it, it might be an honest mistake. Maybe you missed something. But at minimum, consider it. I mean, the reason why I bring this up is it really relates back to like, you know, the black square scenario, like Blackout Tuesday.
Yeah.
And I don't even need to go deeply into that, but clearly a lot of people shared that without thinking about it. Frankly, I shared it without thinking about it. I took it down after I didn't think about it. And the point is that as long as you can share your real intention and that you're thinking through these things, that's what counts. We just need people who are thinking and are intentional and considerate around these things.
Yeah.
So we can keep going. So that's it.
I love that. Okay. So if you were to sort of give people like a one-liner, like the most important thing that they should keep in mind after hearing us talk, or the most important thing about translating for change, what's that takeaway?
Sure. I think it's actually like building knowledge and defining your spheres, right? I think that's a really good place to start because building knowledge is easy. Like I'm not kidding. Don't make it hard on yourself. Literally find a book that resonates with you. And it can either literally be a book that resonates with you from someone that doesn't look like you, just to get another perspective, right? So, and start doing that. So start building that knowledge, anything. Also, probably following people that don't look like you would help a lot, just to expand where you get your information from. Then the other piece is defining your spheres, because I think a lot of people minimize how much impact they can have without acknowledging the influence that they have around them, right? So where do you show up? What roles do you hold in the world? Where can you have impact? And just defining that, honestly, can be an empowering exercise to help you realize, oh, wow, I actually can go and talk to my child right now. Oh, wait, I can actually talk to my friend. Oh, I'm a manager. I can change the way I speak to my team. You know what I'm saying? And these are things that sometimes it's as simple as just defining to give you that clarity. So I think that's the only other thing. I mean, the only other thing is also you can set up a free session with me on my website, which that's another thing you can do because I'm going to be offering them ongoing. I don't really see any reason why I'm going to stop. They're on my website, which is joshupton.com. Very difficult. joshupton.com, and I have a separate tab for BLM sessions. And you can just book them on my calendar. It's all my availability is there. So
awesome. Okay, well, for those of you who are just tuning in, we've been talking to Josh Upton about translating for change and the impact that can make on making social change and creating that in even your own personal spheres of influence. You can catch him at joshupton.com, set up your own session around social justice, translating for change, and the ways that you can make an impact. And if you have any other questions for Josh, you can probably DM him on Instagram. I'm being presumptuous that you can do that.
Sure, please do.
And also feel free to let us know and we'll pass it along. Any final closing remarks, Josh, before we let you go?
Sure, yeah. I think just because I can't help myself. I think just to wrap it up, I just want to ground it in the fact that this is a lifelong movement. Like, we all have a role in it, period. This is not a flash in the pan, and I fully expect that people are going to go in waves of engagement around it. I'm just going to acknowledge the facts. Like, it's unlikely that everyone is going to be 100% on this 100% of the time. And while that's, unfortunate, that's just, I think, reality and human nature.
Yeah.
And so, you can and should tailor it to your actual strengths and what you're actually good at, because that's going to make it easier to have longevity and to maximize your influence, right? And so just make it your own, and make it happen, and
awesome.
find others along the way. So thanks for giving me this platform. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
And catch us live next month, and we'll make an announcement about who's going to be joining us. Stay tuned.
Cool.
Have a great rest of your day.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.